if there is this plant that seems so incredibly useful, then surely we must have a history together. This it seems too aligned to be an accident.
That's Janet Burns. She's the author of an article called How Cannabis Coevolved with Humanity and Could Save It Now. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today I will talk to Janet Burns about cannabis's coevolution with humanity. We're also going to check in with Cameron McIntosh. He's a hempcrete builder who's been on the show before, and he's going to tell us about a very exciting project that he's working on in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, with the folks over at Dawn Services. But first, a word from our sponsor, I&D Hemp, and then we'll come back with a few nuggets of hemp news. Are you using hemp seed oil in your CBD tinctures and topicals? Are you looking for a consistent, reliable, high-quality, American-grown and processed hemp seed oil? I&D Hemp in Montana is cold pressing grain daily and uses a 3-stage filtration process to a 1-micron polishing filter for their ultra-pure hemp seed oil. Ultra-pure hemp seed oil has consistent, superior clarity with no sediment. 5 gallons or 5,000 liters, you can confidently source what you need at indhemp.com. Okay, just a few nuggets of hemp news on this May the 5th, 2021. Here's one from Hemp Industry Daily. This is more about the continuing Delta-8 THC issue here in the hemp industry. The headline says, more states banning Delta-8 THC as regulators clarify its legality under federal law. So it says, from Oregon to Alabama, states are reacting to popular Delta-8 products by 1. Rolling out total bans to limit market access. 2. Considering measures to ban the products. Or 3. Setting potency limits on products containing Delta-8 THC. According to Mariel Weintraub, president of the U.S. Hemp Authority, a third-party product certification body, states will continue to ban Delta-8 THC and other products like it because the cannabinoid is an intoxicant deemed a controlled substance under federal law. Weintraub says, do not produce or sell Delta-8 products without a permit to produce or sell THC as a controlled substance. The correct path for the legal production and sale of Delta-8 products is through a state-licensed adult recreation or medical marijuana operator. Hemp companies not doing this are risking their brand and business future. Sanctions from the FDA, FTC, USDA, and EPA, and possible enforcement actions from DEA and state law enforcement and regulators. Weintraub added that hemp operators manufacturing Delta-8 THC will be barred from certifying products through the U.S. Hemp Authority. All right, there you go. You've been warned. All right, here's a story from the Worcester Business Journal out of Massachusetts. The headline says, state clears way for more than 70,000 acres of cannabis and hemp production. It's written by Monica Bush, and the story says that the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources released updated guidance on Wednesday, making way for more than 70,000 acres belonging to its agricultural preservation, restriction, and farm viability enhancement programs to be used to grow cannabis and hemp. The APR program was established in 1977 and offers to pay farmland owners the difference between fair market value and the agricultural value of their farms in exchange for permanent deed restrictions which preserve farmland for agricultural use in the future. The Farm Viability Enhancement Program, in turn, provides business and technical assistance to established farmers through grant funding in exchange for signing an agricultural covenant on the farm property to keep it in agricultural use for a 5, 10, or 15-year term. Under the new guidance released last week, both hemp and cannabis production will now be allowed on APR and farm viability enhancement lands, so long as the land in question isn't federally funded, because cannabis remains illegal at the federal level. And just one more story. This one comes from the Newcastle News out of Lawrence County, Pennsylvania. Headline says, Dawn demonstrates hemp use in local home rehab. And we've heard about this story before, but I thought this would be a great segue into my conversation with Cameron McIntosh in just a minute. So this story says that a crop once banned for 81 years in the U.S. has found a new home in Newcastle. Literally. Dawn Enterprises is rehabbing a house at 506 Spruce Street, right in the heart of Dawn's Lower East Side Affordable Accessible Housing Initiative, using hemp-based building materials such as hempcrete and hemp wood. Dubbed Project Hemp Home, it's part of a two-pronged Dawn initiative that looks to make Lawrence County in western Pennsylvania a leader in hemp production, processing, and utilization. So I'll put links to those stories up on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. But I wanted to check in with Cameron McIntosh. You know him. He's been on the show before. He's a hempcrete builder. His company is called Amerishon Cast Hemp. And he's also director at large at the U.S. Hemp Building Association. So yeah, let's talk to Cameron. Hey, Cameron McIntosh, welcome back to our show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me again, Eric.
Yeah, so you are involved in this cool project out in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. We heard about it from Lori Daytoner from Dawn Services a few months ago, and then Fred Strathmeyer from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture was talking about it on the show 2 weeks ago. But you're actually there. You were there on the site, and you sort of ran the job. Can you tell us what you just did?
Yeah. So yeah, you got it right. It's a project that was funded in part by the Department of Agriculture here in Pennsylvania. We're very, very fortunate to have good support from them. But basically, we took a home in a blighted neighborhood in Newcastle down to the studs, basically. And there was a lot of work to do to get it to that point, and get it ready to spray 10 inches of hempcrete into the walls.
Wow.
So that's what we just did last week.
Okay.
And we did it in about 6 days. Monday, I showed up to a project that needed some prep work. The guys had been working long overtime hours to get it to the point that it was at. So I was very happy. But it still needed a little push, a little nudge to get it over the finish line, because we had network television coming the next day to film for a show. So it was pretty hectic, but we got it together and started spraying the morning of Tuesday of last week. And cool. We got enough done to have something to show for the TV crew. So nice. Really, really great construction crew though at Dawn, and I can't say enough about them, but we can get into that.
So it's a 2-story house in like a residential neighborhood.
Pretty typical little house for Newcastle.
Okay. The outside of the house too, did you put hemp on that too? Yeah,
we went right through. So basically, they stripped off all the old siding, took it down to the studs, and then built the new interior walls and also a double wall. So we had studs on both sides of the wall, inside and out, and then sprayed from the inside to temporary formwork that we put on the outside. So we used a little bit of recycled plastic sheeting and plywood just to make a temporary form. And then from the inside, we sprayed to that. Okay. So basically then the process is, and you've seen it, Eric, you spray from the inside, and then you use a spiked masonry float to kind of massage the material down. Okay. And expose the nice flat wall surface.
Okay. Is that screeding? Is that what you called that before?
We call that screeding. Yep. Okay. I didn't know if we were going technical or not.
Yeah, going technical. And so tell me again about the spray system you're using. It has a sort of a brand name?
Yep. Yeah. So that's our E-Reezy spray applied hempcrete system created by Damien Baumer in France. Okay. And we are now the North American distributors for that system. It is in beta, I would say. We are offering the equipment, but we're making improvements to it, and we're trying to, for lack of a better term, Americanize it, aka finding the components and the pieces that we need to have the system function properly here in the States, as opposed to having to import them. As we can all agree, importing from France is more difficult now than it's ever been. So,
sure, right.
So we're making improvements, and as I said, we're finding resources here locally to add to the system and make it so that we don't have to order things from overseas.
Right.
But basically, it's a hopper box that you mix the hempcrete and pull it into with a rake, and then it has a set of vacuum lines that hook up to the back of a lance, and that lance also has an air line from a big heavy-duty air compressor. So it's quite a large air compressor. It's like a small Mack truck engine on a trailer. And that's what drives and creates the suction to pull the material pre-mixed down the tubes and hit the wall.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different. There are other spray applied methods out there, and I'm actually very fortunate right now to be in Cape Cod with colleagues of mine at Hempstone in Massachusetts cool. On a project that they're doing with a different spray applied system. So it's a little bit of market research, if you will, for me.
Cool. Yeah.
But it's a very much more expensive system. So this is sort of the Ford truck. The E-Reezy is like the Ford truck of spray application systems, and it's accessible for people who are looking to get into retrofitting or new building. But it's very good for retrofitting, which is what we did at Newcastle.
Cool. How much hemp did you use at Newcastle?
Oh man. Geez.
Ballpark
so we
it,
went through 28, somewhere around 244-pound bags.
Okay.
To install that house, and that included the exterior walls and the interior walls. We did the partition walls between the bathrooms and the living spaces, the stairwell, things like that. And it was actually really amazing. We had a radio playing downstairs at one point on the last couple of days where we were just kind of going around and simonizing and fixing things. We had a radio playing, and I could barely hear it upstairs. And it's a tiny house.
Oh wow!
It's not a tiny house. It's a normal residential home. Yeah, I would say about 1,000 square feet. But you could literally, the radio was blaring downstairs, and you could hardly hear it upstairs. So it was really impressive. I mean, when you do the interior walls with hempcrete, you end up to the point where you really can't hear things like mechanical noises and toilets flushing, water rushing, things like that. So it's really interesting, and it'll be a really great home for someone.
Cool. And this project is like you're trying to prove that you could grow all of this stuff here. Like this could be completely domestic.
Right. Cool. And unfortunately at this point we don't have good access to domestically grown herd here in Pennsylvania, but the point of the project, like you just said, was to demonstrate for the farming community in and around Newcastle, which Lori has engaged with and has been growing hemp for about 2 years now on their test acres program, which is also funded by the PA Department of Ag, to prove that there is actually an outlet for fiber industrial hemp in Pennsylvania, and this is what it looks like. So it's Eric, you hear about hempcrete, you think, oh, that's great, but you really don't get it until you step into something that's been built with it. So that's sort of what we were going for here. And then also, as Lori mentioned, I'm sure in her show, their flooring is actually being produced by Greg Wilson Hempwood down in Kentucky with 2 bales of hemp that they actually grew.
That's awesome.
So there will actually be hemp that was grown in Newcastle in this project in the form of hempwood flooring, which I think is pretty special.
Yeah, that's so great. Well, cool. That's awesome. I'm really proud of what you're doing, and it's great that I get to share this story with listeners. Great stuff happening in the hemp space in Pennsylvania, and
definitely, man. Yeah, and before we cut out here, I just want to give a shout out to the crew that they gave me at Dawn. It's comprised of a group of men that, for again, lack of a better term, have things in their backgrounds that would make them difficult to hire anywhere else. Let's just leave it at that. But these guys that they hire, who other people would pass up because of background issues, they end up having an 80% retention rate with them, which is much higher than the average for people who don't have background issues. So these guys are again, as many of the people that Don hire, people that would have been overlooked by other companies for one reason or another, but they were hands down the best crew I've ever worked with. They were awesome. Kind to each other. They were younger guys on site. They were very patient and kind with them. You'd think they'd be chewing their heads off for doing dumb things. Not at all. They were very supportive of each other. A great tight-knit family. Every day someone brings breakfast. They rotate through. Another person brings lunch. I mean, they were really special.
That's cool.
And worked so hard for us. They had put in long overtime hours just to get the thing ready, and then ended up having to deal with me for a week. Excuse me, pushing.
Right.
Through rain, all kinds of obstacles, and didn't once complain or get ill with each other. So,
nice.
Just a little plug out there for anyone who's looking to hire. Don't judge someone based on a background check. Give them a chance, and you'll be rewarded. So.
Awesome. So it sounds like positive project on so many different levels. That's great.
Great teams on and off site. The consortium that Lori pulled together for the grant, including Penn State, the Pennsylvania Housing Research Center, Parsons New School. I mean, the project really came together, and the credit goes to Lori and the construction crew there. I was just a little pain in their ass for a week there.
But and so you didn't, like, the project's not done. You have more work to come back to.
So the project is they're still working on a few things in the house, mechanical things. In the meantime, waiting for the hempcrete to cure, so that we can then plaster the inside, and then the exterior for a couple different reasons. We're using a rain screen detail where there'll be locally sourced hemlock siding that's separated from the wall with a little bit of an air gap, and then an air barrier. So not typical Tyvek, which is a vapor barrier.
Mm-hmm.
We're using a product that's airtight but vapor permeable. So it basically does what the plaster does on the inside, but for the exterior. But since you won't be seeing it, and the plastering gets to be very expensive very quickly, we're using this rain screen detail with locally sourced hemlock. So it'll be a really beautiful project when it all comes together. I would say in about 6 weeks, a month, 6 weeks, I'll be back out there to check it out and see how things are going, and to move on to the next steps. So, but again, it's back in the hands of that very capable Don crew. So
cool.
Looking forward to getting back out there with those guys.
Awesome. Well, Cameron, I appreciate you catching up with me this morning, and I know you're busy. You're off to another job. You said you're up in New England somewhere?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Cape Cod.
Cape Cod. All right.
The big 6,000 square foot home on Cape Cod. So out of my own frying pan and into someone else's fryer.
All right. Well, good luck to you, and we'll catch up with you soon. Thanks again.
Cheers, Eric. Thanks, man.
I'll put a couple of photos of Project Hemp Home up on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. So go check it out. It's like we get a glimpse of the possible future, where we're growing the raw materials for our houses in our farm fields. So, okay, my next guest is Janet Burns. She is a writer. She lives in Brooklyn, and she wrote this great article called How Cannabis Coevolved with Humanity and Could Save It Now. So here we go. Janet Burns, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing about as well as can be.
Good. It's good to hear. So recently I came across an article you wrote for Forbes. I know you wrote it last year, but it just sort of crossed my desk lately, and it's called How Cannabis Coevolved with Humanity and Could Save Us Now. So I found that article fascinating, and I wanted to reach out to you and have a conversation. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I had been thinking about it for a few years before it came out, and I was so glad to finally publish it.
Will you give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, I am a freelance writer and journalist based in Brooklyn. I grew up on the West Coast of this continent, and I have covered cannabis and drugs from medical, social, legal, and possibly other standpoints as well. Certainly, business and pharma included. As it happens, I've had cannabis or hemp involved in my life through a significant portion of it through young adulthood up through now. And only in the past several years did a few sort of factors click for me in a way that's been very helpful, fairly astounding, and really changed my perspective on not only the work that I was already doing, but just what I think our country and our society needs to do going forward. So let's keep going.
Yeah, if you want to expand on some of those things. Yeah, please.
I'll try and keep it short. When I just started out writing, I had, held a few jobs before that. Right before I moved out to Brooklyn, I moved to Brooklyn to try and quit opioids, which I successfully did, that I had been using during a grad program back in California. And when I came out here, one of the things that I had to address in terms of getting my health and my care back on track was migraine headaches. And I had once been given or gotten access to a drug that is called ergotamine and has been used for thousands of years, as I found out from when is available in many countries. It is derived from a kind of mold that grows on, in some cultures, rye grain, but basically any kinds of grains. And it's been used for a couple of different medical, conditions or treatments for thousands of years. And when I came out to New York, I was prescribed the only version of this very ancient, traditionally used, naturally occurring, pretty easy to produce chemical that's available in the US. And I was walking home from the pharmacy one day, and I noticed that 8-dose box I was carrying was priced at $3,600. And that really astounded me as well. And I started looking into that and sort of learning more about the pharmaceutical industry and 20th century medical and drug history in the US from a more critical perspective, being aware that sometimes, the resources that we have are not being used, distributed, or for that matter, priced appropriately. And as I continued down that path, what really was staring me in the face was cannabis. And I just, used that from the scientific or Latin name that is used for the various species of that genus, all of which have, as it turns out, been involved in human ancestral lives for probably millions of years. And as I mentioned again, because if this was such a sort of significant internal breakthrough for me, because cannabis had been, if not in my life, in my face, growing up in Hawaii and in California and living in British Columbia before moving out to New York, and just the extent that plant has played in our lives. One day, as I'd been thinking about these topics, I started searching for academic articles on cannabis human coevolution. I typed in those words, and one of the first things that came up was this article by a researcher and a alternative and natural medical practitioner named Sunil Agarwal, and it's called "'Tis in Our Nature," which makes reference to a bit of Shakespeare, I believe. His article was talking about exactly what I had found myself wondering. If there is this plant that seems so incredibly useful, then surely we must have a history together. It seems too aligned to be an accident. And what Dr. Agarwal does and others called they're ethnobotanical researchers, or human medical and cultural researchers. And yeah, he kindly gave me an interview and walked me through, one of the most fascinating and useful hours of my life, explaining, that what I had kind of come around to guessing was evinced by the work that he'd done. And he walked me through its path from the Tibetan Plateau and the Himalayas, where the plant was pushed to evolve certain qualities, which, as it happens, or it has, come to be seen, are very compatible with us and with, in fact, other mammals and other vertebrates all over the planet. And so, yeah, not for no reason, he explained, we have carried this plant and versions of it, which have, evolved over time, just as we have, all around the globe. And only very recently, for some very complicated and, at the end of the day, troubling and not very good reasons, we have decided that this plant should be off limits. And the way that he explained it to me at the time was that there's an evolutionary garden.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about that. Can you explain what Dr. Agarwal means with the evolutionary garden?
Absolutely.
Like, what's that concept? How does cannabis fit into it?
Yeah, no problem. So over time, our species, as people be familiar, and any biologists listening will, shake their hands at their computers or their radios or what have you. It's really rough and tumble summary here. But we have gone through different periods of development in terms of how we gather our food, which has, had everything to do with or affected our different social patterns and other aspects of how we live our lives. We've heard of hunter-gatherers and so on. I think that term may be antiquated now. And we move into agriculture. And around the time, when we become agricultural, at that point, we have chosen to cultivate things around us or carry them with us and, literally plant them in the ground. We have identified advantages from different plants or perhaps secretions, as Dr. Agarwal pointed out. We have the case of bees, say, for honey, numerous other ones. But yeah, we have formed these coevolutionary or compatible or what's the other terms?
Mutualistic.
Thank you. I brought up my own article to help remind me, just because so much information passes through my head.
Yeah, it was a while ago too when you wrote it.
All right, but yeah, the garden that humanity has cultivated and fostered over time includes a number of different useful plants and fungi and, again, animal secretions, according to his definition of this evolutionary garden. We can think of grains that we get different uses from. You can distill them into wine, you can eat them. There are different husks we can use from different plants, or whether they're fruits or grains or nuts, or even don't bear something that we like to eat. Fibers that we make into clothing or shelter, and over time into fuel as well. So over time, we have cultivated this evolutionary garden, as Dr. Agarwal explained, but only very recently we have cordoned off a part of that garden, which has been with us for hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of years because of biochemical compatibility or usefulness.
Yeah, and that gets into the endocannabinoid system, right? Can you explain what the endocannabinoid system is?
Again, I'm not a scientist, so I'll do my best here. But the endocannabinoid system is operative throughout the body. It was summarized to me as being a system that is charged with normalizing other systems and operations in the body and helping maintain sort of a stasis. Throughout your body, you have within your, as part of your endocannabinoid system, receptor types. Now, you may have heard of neurological receptors in your brain. There are receptors throughout your body that are picking up and transmitting signals in chemical form. Sometimes those are chemicals that are introduced from outside the body, and sometimes they come from chemicals that we're producing inside the body, referred to as the endo. So endocannabinoids are produced within the body and already exist. Phytocannabinoids, an example of that would be one of the THCs or CBD things, or CBG as one of its earlier unprocessed states in terms of cannabinoids entering the body. But yeah, so the endocannabinoid system, much like the nervous system, well, yeah, it's hard for me to bring up parallels, but is an evolved system within our body that, as I learned in the process of doing research around this topic and from speaking with Dr. Agarwal and others, harkens back to not just when we were, up on two legs and descending from Africa and Asian zones ourselves. I say descending because in some cases the elevation was quite high, especially in Asia and the Tibetan Plateau where cannabis was traced back to itself. But those receptor types go even further back to, as Agarwal put it, when multicellular organisms were becoming multicellular and we're trying to figure out how to send communication and modulate action.
So super ancient. Yeah.
Super ancient. Yeah. It's just one of the oldest things. And that for him and for other researchers was a big indicator when looking at our ancestral species, but also those of many other species around us, that cannabinoids can play a part, that our body is evolved to interact with this chemical type that are found in this plant.
Right. It's not a coincidence. It's.
Yeah, exactly. And that for me, the more I learned about and was impressed with this plant, even though, I was aware of the history of marijuana and hemp and cannabis in this country to some degree. I was certainly aware of criminalization and the creation of a black market. It was that thought process, realizing as research just has steadily come out for decades, but especially in the past several years, as state laws and just general awareness in the US have fostered an atmosphere where more research can happen. I felt overwhelmed by the information that I was seeing and things that were being confirmed, that in terms of treatment possibilities and just supporting the different ways that the endocannabinoid system, when triggered either internally, if someone's body's working out okay, or if there's an imbalance, you need some of those externally introduced cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, to help create balance again. There are applications in cancer, for diabetes, for various of the most complicated and recently to doctors confounding conditions of the brain. The fact that that hemp crops can be used to clean up our water supply, but also a generation after that to make clothing or fuel to build homes. Just that it was so astonishingly useful to us was what finally brought me around to thinking, well, is that because we know each other, because we've been evolving to work together, and we're with that garden, we plant the seed in the ground, we are supporting that plant, doing our part in a way to see that it continues its life and its reproduction. So it is, it can go both ways, but I think that we need to, as a species, we need to sort out that stasis for ourselves, not just in our bodies, but as a society, and what plants we're willing to work with as allies.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like we shouldn't be surprised by cannabis and how useful it is, but because we've sort of forgotten some history and we took a big chunk out of it, we have some catching up to do with this old friend. But there's a great
way of putting it. Yeah.
There's more benefits to humanity than just like the physical health that comes with, cannabinoidal stuff. Can you talk about some of the cultural or psychological impacts that this plant has had on humanity?
Absolutely. Something that really, really struck me and stuck with me while I was working on this article over a course of a couple years was the role that it has played not only in our country's legal history of oppressing people of color, and namely Black and Hispanic, as well as Asian Americans, just under what we now call the drug war that has been around for quite a while. Um, but the role that it has also played in these cultures as they suffered under slavery and imperialism and Jim Crow, and through many, the challenges of today. It's a complicated, multifaceted, moment in this history. But yeah, okay.
So what should everybody understand when it comes to the history of cannabis and communities of color, like especially Black communities in America? What should we understand about restorative justice? What roles and responsibilities do the cannabis, marijuana, and hemp industries have here?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that. That's, to me, one of the most important questions for the hemp and cannabis industries facing us right now, that just desperately needs to be dealt with. I think that criminalized communities, which is to say in the U.S., predominantly Black and Brown communities, need to be, should be, certainly deserve to be the recipients of restorative justice in the form of not only expungement and, rules establishing equity in new state cannabis markets, or even federal one, but I think it should go further. I think it's just so important that those of us that are already working in various parts of the cannabis industry help folks that are just catching up on, what is absolutely a booming industry around the country and around the world, and one that, we need right now and can do a lot for us, help them catch up to putting together a robust platform, a robust front to put folks of color in the lead who have already been doing that work, who, for the past, not just the past few years, but decades throughout the drug war, in the Black market that was built by Black and Brown people, which also, something that I noted in the article, thank you that you reminded me of, is that, over on the West Coast, say, and in different parts of the country, this plant, which people have never stopped wanting to use and never stopped wanting to buy, and which, an economy has continued for, whether or not it was, whether or not the federal government acknowledged it, I think that should be given, as some people put it, a legacy to legal pathway. People that are already doing that work, that have taken those risks, who have paid with years of their lives, or seen their family members taken away or lost because of that drug war.
Yeah, it's really frustrating and heartbreaking to me to know that, there are people in jail right now for possession of marijuana or whatever, when then there's people who are just making boatloads of money from it. And it is, mostly a racial divide. There's rich white guys making a whole lot more money, and then there's, just generations of Black men in jail, and communities have been decimated, and it's just frustrating and heartbreaking. And I can't even imagine what it's like, to be someone of color and have that be the reality. I mean, I'm coming from a very privileged place here, right? And I can sort of see this from the outside, and it's still just so frustrating and heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. And, as as more states or municipalities continue to legalize or decriminalize for their populations, I'm sure we'll hear from more and more people that have been locked up or have otherwise been silenced, who haven't been able to vote, and whose stories have just been concealed by the state of things. It'll certainly take time, no matter what, to even get these programs in place. But as you pointed out, even as we're talking here tonight, there are absolutely people in my state and in yours that are sitting locked up for a joint. And when I meet people that are coming into the hemp industry in good faith, they're excited about the applications and the possibilities about bringing it to their states. Something that I always do is welcome them and also try and remind them of the history, remind them of the fact that there are people still locked up for a plant which it is legal to send across state lines, to carry around, to display in front of a police officer if you so choose, if it has less than 0.03% THC, but if it's slightly more. And as is often the case, if you're someone that's living in a historically criminalized community, could be sitting in jail for. And I try and introduce that as an emergency, not just ethically, but practically speaking. Our most talented people, the people who are carrying, very hard-won personal skills and experience in making the best possible sustainable plant crops, are so often sitting in jail or forced to hide the work that they're doing.
Do you think if more people were aware of this plant's long history and prehistory with humans, that could be like a path towards greater acceptance and less stigma?
I think that this kind of information could absolutely help more people be interested in and want to support changes around this plant. And, I think it's important to remember that science is not static. It's a process. Maybe not in my lifetime, but certainly in my mom's lifetime, there were commercials on TV with doctors endorsing this or that cigarette. Within my lifetime, certainly, we were told that fat was really the issue. There were lots of low-fat products that had quite high sugar content.
Yeah, sugar was fine, but fat was terrible. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, these things are changing frequently, and I'm not saying that we should let bygones be bygones. Far from it. When it comes to the harms that have been impacted systemically for generations, the plant, but individually, we're always learning. I think you can teach old dogs new tricks. And, I've never had a conversation with someone where I shared what you and I just talked about and they weren't interested. They didn't believe me, or they didn't think it made sense. I think this really does click for people, and it opens up a lot of new possibilities. I mean, hempcrete,
Yeah, right. I know, it's amazing. You were talking earlier about Big Pharma. Do you think Big Pharma is poised to take over the cannabis industry?
I have been working on some other things over the past year, so I'm afraid I don't have my ear to the ground as much on that. But that's what I hear. I hear people concerned about that. And, they can come see me about it. Not if I have my way, in the most polite and ladylike way.
Janet Burns, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for the work that you're doing, researching and writing about the cannabis plant.
Thank you so much for having me. Be well.
All right, that's Janet Burns, a writer from Brooklyn. I will put a link to her article about the coevolution of cannabis and humanity on the show page for this episode at Lancaster Farming, along with all of those other things I promised you throughout the show, the news nuggets, the photos of the hemp house in Newcastle, all that stuff. So thanks for listening to our show today. My name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. As always, you can get in touch with me by email. You can send it to podcast@lancasterfarming.com, or you can call me up, 717-721-4462. Leave me a message and I will call you back. All right, so what else is on my mind these days? Well, of course, I'm planning this road trip. We're going to go seek out fiber and grain growers and producers and processors. We're going to go to North Carolina and Kentucky and the Midwest and Colorado and all around up to Oregon and Montana, Nebraska. It's really, really coming together as sort of what I hope to be a transformative experience for all of us, right? So if you want to hear more about that or find ways to get involved yourself, definitely get in touch with me. Okay, until next time, I will see you in the newspaper. Episode 131 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2021 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.
Industrial hemp.